Hello and welcome to Wine with Andy. I'm Andy. This mini video is actually not going to feature any wine at all, unfortunately. Instead, I'm going to be talking about glasses. I've got a row of various kinds of glasses in front of me, and we're going to talk about what makes a good glass for tasting and what makes a good glass for drinking various types of wine. So, I said in the very first episode a few pointers about what makes a good glass for tasting. This is the kind of glass that I normally use. It came from IKEA, cost about £1. It's got a nice wide bowl at the bottom and a narrower opening at the top, and that shape means that there's a big surface area for aromas to evaporate from and a narrower opening to funnel those aromas towards my nose when I smell the wine. The shape also helps keep the wine in the glass when you swirl it. So if I put a little bit of water in here, you can see that it's really easy to swirl this glass without getting water everywhere. I say really easy, it does take a bit of practice, and of course it's easier to do it on the table than off. If I were to put the same amount of wine or water in a normal highball kind of a glass, it's very different. There's only a narrow surface area at the bottom there for the aromas to evaporate from, and my nose is a long way from the surface of the liquid when I sniff it, if I put in a sort of normal wine pour. It's also not funneling those aromas, so the concentration of the aromas down here is the same as it is at the top of the glass, whereas in this glass, the concentration of the aromas gets bigger because there's more space at the bottom than at the top, so those aromas get sort of funneled in together into my nose. Perhaps the extreme opposite would be this, a martini glass. So you can see if I pour in here, the surface area at the opening is actually a lot bigger than the surface area of the wine. So if I try to smell, all of the aromas are escaping around my face and not going into my nose, so I can't really smell the wine very well. Now, you'd never really get served wine or serve wine in a martini glass unless you'd run out of everything else. But you do see some wine glasses that are kind of this shape, that go outwards and then don't come back in at the top. And those glasses are pretty useless for tasting. They're also pretty bad for swirling the wine, because when I try to swirl this, it goes everywhere. You'd be better off, in fact, just using a jam jar that's the right shape. So you can see in this jam jar, I've actually got a wider surface area where the liquid is than at the top. So again, easier to smell, and it doesn't go all over me when I swirl it. Now, there are some specialist wine glasses out there. This one is an international standard wine tasting glass. It's used for competitions, for judging, that sort of thing. But it's quite small. It's also quite tall and has a really narrow opening. So it has that ability to keep the wine in there, and it has that ability to funnel the aromas. We don't fit very much in it, which is fine for a tasting kind of a situation, because if you're tasting lots of wines in a competition, you don't actually want much wine. Lots of people spit it out. I often don't bother, but lots of people do because they don't want to get drunk. Tastes like water. So, that's that glass. Now, I have a few of these in my cupboard. I don't actually use them for wine tasting. I much prefer this one because it has a bit more space. But what I do use them for is drinking fortified wines, things like port and sherry. And actually you'll see specialist port and sherry glasses that are a very similar shape. And that's because when you're drinking a fortified wine, because it's stronger, you don't want so much liquid. And you do want a very narrow opening, so that you restrict the evaporation of alcohol out of the glass when you're not drinking. You also allow quite a lot of air compared to the amount of liquid, so that the flavours can sort of accumulate and develop in that space. Because fortified wines are often more complex than normal table wines, and that extra space to develop really helps bring out the flavour. Talking of bringing out the flavour, the same thing is true of red wines. So this is a red wine glass, compared to this one, which is technically a white wine glass, you might see that this is quite a lot bigger, certainly it's wider, and often you'll find red wine glasses are really wide compared to the white wine glasses that are sort of marketed along with. And that's because red wine is that bit more complex than white wine. It has extra things like tannins and colour, which do change with exposure to air. So that extra area in the glass and the extra air inside the glass helps bring out those flavours more when you smell it. But again, it's the same basic shape. The other specialist glass you might have in your cupboard is a champagne flute. Now, looking at this, you might think that's not great for wine tasting. And no, it's not. If you want to really get all of the flavour out of a really high quality champagne, you're better off putting it in this sort of a glass. But what this does do is minimise the surface area of champagne at the top. And that makes it stay fizzy for longer, because the surface area controls the amount of bubbles that are escaping. So champagne in this glass will go flat a lot quicker than champagne in this glass. Perhaps not a problem depending on how quick you can drink it. The other thing that this does, if you fill it up to halfway, or to the widest point of the glass rather, then that's a lot more vertical height of liquid than that, which means that it gets to show off one of the special things of sparkling wine. It has bubbles. You can see them rising through the liquid, and that makes it look pretty. So that's glasses. I hope you learned something. I'll see you next time with some wine.